Welcome, everyone. We're so glad to have you all here. We're really excited that so many people are interested in joining us for this Ask Me Anything session. And as Brittany said, we're very excited to have Jason Olsch join us today. He's one of our dam solutions specialists, but he has not been on our AMAs before. So we're very excited. Thanks for joining, Jason. And so, as many of you know, if you've been to these sessions before, you might have seen me. My name is Kara Van Malsen. I'm a partner and managing director at AVP. And if you don't know who AVP is, we are a consultancy and we specialize in all things dam related. So everything from planning, selection, implementing, launching, scaling, optimizing, all of that related to digital asset management and of course, integrated systems with your dams. I have been consulting in this space for about 15 years. So you've seen a lot of different things. So I think Jason's kind of has similar kind of a background experience that we've seen a lot of different scenarios. So that's where we're going to draw from as we talk through how we think about answering your questions today. So I'll pass it to Jason to say hello.
Great. Thanks, Kara. Yeah, I'm Jason Olsch, dam solutions architect at AVP. I've got about 10 years of experience doing dam and dam related stuff, including MAM and archives and all kinds of things. Currently, what I do a lot of is help people turn their use cases into requirements so they can pick out the right kind of dam system, which is a totally different webinar. But once they've got one, figuring out how to get the system to do what they need it to do, helping work with the vendor, and post-implementation when people are struggling with like how to grow or how to get more out of their current system. So I'm going to lead off. I'm going to ask the first question, and it's one I don't think people ask enough, honestly, which is there a way to calculate how much staff support is needed to keep a dam running? And this is, again, I don't think people ask this of themselves enough, like how many people am I going to need to do the thing? So I'm going to ask it of Kara. Kara, how would you calculate how much staff is needed to keep a dam running?
Yeah, I wish this is one of our questions that came in ahead of time. So we're going to be starting with those and then we'll be looking into the chat or the Q&A to see what's coming in. So yeah, someone said, thank you to whoever submitted this question. Yeah, I wish I had a calculator to share with you to say, plug in these variables and then you'll get the answer. It's not quite that. We don't have anything quite there yet, but what I do have is a graphic that I'm going to share. That this is how I think about this when I'm trying to help answer this question about how many staff do we need. So the different variables to consider are how many assets do you have? How many users do you have? How many integrations do you have? And how complex is the dam platform that you're using? Because large numbers in any one of those areas and or large amounts of kind of complexity or customization or configuration on the system side will kind of help you determine the answer to this question. So let me give you like these examples. So in this chart, like organization 1, they have a small number of assets, a pretty small number of users. They're like maybe one integration that's very simple, and they have a really, really simple system. They might be able to get away with a half FTE, just somebody who's kind of like they're responsible for the dam. And we do encourage that there's some ownership here. We don't necessarily encourage kind of shared collective dam admin. There's just a lot of complexity there, but we can talk about that later. So maybe somebody's kind of the primary admin and it's a half FTE. But let's go to organization 2. So in this case, they've got a good amount of assets, not so many users, maybe very minimal on the integration, but they have a complex system because those assets are complex. Maybe this is a cultural heritage organization that has compound assets, multi-parts with lots of relationships. There's complex configurations in that platform to allow those relationships to work. And there's a lot of managing of assets because, there's all that, that it's not just flat images and each one is a single asset. Like there's all sorts of stuff going on there. In that case, we might say you might need a full person, a full-time dedicated staff, maybe even two, to help with that, because you're going to have a lot of continued maintenance to do on that platform and making sure those assets are all getting in there right, structured right, et cetera. Then our organization number 3, and we have clients that fit all of these profiles. So, this is stuff we see all the time. But so small number of assets, large number of users, and they've got a lot of integrations and they've got a very complex system. So this case is maybe where you're going to need a small team, because you've got 70,000 users you need to support. It's going to be hard to do that alone, or maybe not 70,000. Maybe that's my org 5. That's my 70,000 users. This is like 10,000 or whatever. It's a good enough number that like supporting the users, making sure the system configurations are kept up to date and maintained, and keeping the integrations running are going to require more people. So I think you get the picture here, like how you might want to think about this. So it totally depends on the size of your organization, and then these variables will come into play. We've seen cases where, there is a half-time DAM admin and it works if it's the right scale. We've seen places where that totally fails because that it's just too much for that person. We've seen a very large team. Some organizations have, quite a number of people who are running and adminning the DAM because there's just a lot to do. So yes, short answer is it depends. And that's the answer to pretty much everything we're going to be talking about today. But
Yeah.
I want to ask Jason, what are your thoughts on this question?
Yeah, well, there's other ways to think about this too. Like they don't have to be dedicated DAM team members. Like they could be a concept that came up early in the age in DAM generally is having DAM champions in the various departments. If you have a very large organization and they've got a bunch of assets that are specific to their workflow or their needs, having someone on that team be somewhat responsible for DAM stuff, like naming things, uploading things, managing things, will take a lot of heat off of the DAM team. So you may be able to squeeze a bit more work out of people who are already doing this as part of their job without having to hire more team members. So that I see that often in very large organizations. But yeah, especially if you have one of the more modern DAM systems that has a ton of automation, like automatic tagging, and you're okay with that and it works for your use cases, you may not need more than a couple people, or you may need 10. It really depends on what you're doing for the people you work for and how hard it is, like you point out, to actually manage the things in the system, depending on their complexity, the system complexity. It depends is not a very satisfying answer, I know. It's super contextual, but thinking creatively about like what needs to happen and what actually the DAM team is responsible for is going to give you the answer that you're looking for.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Like it depends on the operating model, because if there's one team, like say it's an IT that owns the DAM, kind of that they're the platform owners, but you have these different business units that are going to be adding and contributing, then that maybe there is that shared model of operation and governance that Jason described, and the numbers are a little different, right? And so yeah, how centralized is this? But again, like I don't think you want like just the IT team says, here's your DAM, have fun, and there's no one actually kind of running the shop and everyone's stocking their own shelves and checking it out. So that I would
pretty often. That happens pretty often though. Is that if IT tends to select technology products, you sometimes will just, here's your DAM, find some DAM people to run it and figure it out. I've seen that quite a few times. It's not a fun situation to be in, especially if you didn't help pick it out. But yeah, it's not a great model.
Yeah. So yep, we're going to probably have a lot of these. It depends, but we're trying to give you as much color and context as we can. So I want to go to a next question that we received in advance, which is, can you provide some insight into annual costs, even if it's a broad range, depending on your system, storage, et cetera? Jason, what's your thought on how to approach this one?
Yeah, so this is heavily dependent on growth. So what you start out with, if you don't think about how fast you're going to grow, you're not going to be able to budget correctly. And this is often a part of system selection, honestly, is thinking like, okay, we make 2 TB of stuff a week. We're going to need a ton of storage probably sooner than later, versus like we only do that much like a year. So it has a lot to do with storage is a huge component of costs. If you have a system that has seat licenses, that's another one. You have to think very carefully about who should have access to the system and what kind of access they should have. Vendors kind of seem to go back and forth on the seat license model. Like so many admins, so many contributors, so many end users. Some people just do like, 500 people for a year. That's it. So it's very, very vendor specific. So again, it depends. It also depends on like what you're trying to accomplish. So DAM systems, if you are in the market or haven't been in the market recently, go anywhere from free to millions of dollars per year. So there's not really like a range I can give anybody without knowing more about specific circumstances. But if you bring your own storage, you can cut the cost significantly if the vendor supports that, because storage again is like one of the biggest expenses. A software license usually isn't that expensive. And then again, if you add integration support, additional like AI services, professional services, that starts to creep up. So if you think carefully about like what the vendor tends to target, that's probably the easiest way to figure out how much you're going to end up paying. So like enterprise level versus, small regional Midwest archive type folks, those prices are going to be very different. I don't know, Kara, what do you think about this one? Like, how would you consider annual costs other than mostly storage and seat licenses?
Yeah, I think those are really important. And I agree with your point about growth being a really important consideration. So when we're working with organizations to help them select dams and we're doing some pricing analysis based on what we receive from the vendors, we're going to try to map that out over 5 years or so, just to see how that plays out given your growth projections. So we'll look at, which of these are one-time costs, which are ongoing and recurring annual costs. So we can kind of factor all that in. And then, like Jason said, with your storage growth, what does that start to look like and how does that impact your costs? There's also questions about how you're going to be managing storage, whether you're using tiered storage, what kind of assets you're storing, how you do life cycle and archive management, et cetera, et cetera. But this is kind of the details that you'd want to think about as you're doing that 5-year total cost of ownership projection. And then you can kind of see what the curve is looking like. So as Jason said, yeah, costs wildly vary, and the license can vary too. Some dams, like, they are free. Some are $20,000 a year. Some are $100,000 a year. Some are $800,000 a year. So, it's just that there's not a great single answer to that question, but there's also, in addition to license, there's all these other things that kind of layer into this question.
Yeah, this actually is related to the next question I was going to ask. There's actually a few questions in the Q&A section that are similar to this next one that we got ahead of time, which is what's the best way to choose a vendor, and which vendor should we pick, and how do we know which one to pick, and how do we go about that? And I'll let you answer that one. I have thoughts, but
well, the main thought we have on that is it's not really the topic we were hoping to talk about today. We have a webinar coming up on October 7th that is just on that topic, how to go about choosing a dam vendor. So we're going to do a very focused session. It's not going to be this Q&A style. Of course, you'll be able to ask questions, but we're going to be doing a full presentation with Amy Rudersdorf, who's our lead on technology selection projects. And so we do want to encourage you to come to that session. I think Brittany's going to put it in the chat how you can register for that, but we'll be doing a complete walkthrough of how to approach selecting a dam vendor. And the other thing that we'll share, I think in the chat, is we have a page on our website that just went live that is all about selecting a dam, and it has a lot of different articles on that topic. So I hope that'll give you a bit of a start, and please attend our October 7th webinar, because that's a big topic, and we want to make sure to give it the time it needs. I don't think we can do it here. It's a little too hefty for this. And we did a session like this on that topic a few months ago. So that's another thing, is we can come back and do another one of those if people want us to. So do you want to add anything, Jason, to that?
Yeah, the question that was asked in Q&A was slightly different. It was, is there a resource that compares and contrasts different dam systems? And there are lots of things out there like G2 and there's a couple of other places that like review or let people post reviews of dam systems. But as far as I'm aware, there is not a resource in existence that compares dam systems in a way that is accurate or reliable, because there is so much that goes into developing requirements, and the vendors are very can be very opaque about how much things cost and what features they actually offer sometimes. So as far as I'm aware, there isn't anything like that. It would be really cool if there was. It would be super helpful, and I want to build one, but it's a significant challenge.
Yeah, it is. I guess there are a couple sites, I mean, and services that might cost some money, but you could take a look at. Real Story Group has a tool to help you compare. There is a cost to that. And then there is a site called damvendors.com that has some interesting ways to plug in your different needs and see what options. I would say also, like, I think Jason referenced like G2 and Capterra. Sometimes there's a lot of stuff in there that are not really dams.
Right.
So I think you have to be careful about that. Like if you go on G2 or Capterra, you're going to get Airtable as an answer. And I don't think most folks here are looking for Airtable or Monday.com or Canva, that they do some minimal asset management work, but they're not digital asset management.
What I like G2 and Capterra for is looking for negative reviews of things, like just to see like what people are having troubles with. If you have a short list in mind, that's a great resource to see, like, or even Reddit, just like type the name of the software into Reddit and see if people are asking questions, encountering challenges, because people will complain even if they don't praise, and so you kind of know what you're getting into. Look up AEM sometime on G2 just to read some of those reviews. They're pretty good.
It's a good idea.
Go ahead.
Okay, so we're going to go back to some of the questions that came in advance, and then we will be coming over to more of the questions that are coming through the Q&A. So we'll do a little bit of both. Okay, so the next one, we got this one in advance. Also very good question. Does the dam company typically provide training and onboarding for staff, or is that something we might bring in a consultant to do? Or do we need to develop and implement the training on our own? So yeah, what are your thoughts on that, Jason?
So it depends. We should just rename this "It Depends." Depends on the vendor. It depends on the size of the vendor and the size of the team. But what I often see, and what we often see, is that the vendor will have training resources, even if they don't have a training program. A couple of the larger enterprise vendors have training programs where they will train your staff, but they will mostly be doing train the trainer. They'll be training admins. And then of course, if you bring in a consultant, they can train your users, but because dam systems tend to be sort of sandboxy nowadays, everything is built out to your workflows, to your specifications. It's going to have to be somebody who's very intimately familiar with your specific configuration before they can train your users. So if they didn't help set it up, they're going to be in the same boat you're in, where they're not going to know how to do anything. So you typically want to develop your own training materials if you don't have a consultant brought in to help you with that, because it has to be like, how do you want people to use your system? What do they need to be able to do? What do they need to know how to do? As for like admin stuff, the vendor will often provide training for how to administrate the system, but again, not for your specific use cases. It tends to be very unique circumstances for every group. Kara, same question for you. What's your experience with training folks?
Yeah, I think this one is I think it's a pretty straightforward answer. It's a little less, it depends. I think you're right. Like so what the vendors will typically do is provide how to use their platform training. And a lot of that is for admin. Even if it's for end user level training, it's going to be more generic. So if you do want training that is adapted to your specific users, configurations, use cases, you will have to develop those on your own in most cases. Most of the time, vendors are not going to be doing that type of training. So when we work with organizations on the implementation, oftentimes we will then develop and then deliver the training or build the training resources. So this can be living in their DAM system, in their libraries. And yeah, but yeah, Jason's right. You can't just bring someone in at the end and have them. I mean, you can, it's just, you know, they're going to be needing to get up to speed on how you've configured your system and how that's working. So whether you do it on your own or bring somebody in at that point, you know, it's kind of more about like, what capacity do you have at that point? So yeah, I think that's pretty much the way I would think about that.
Another thing to consider is that takes time too. Like you can't really train people while you're building the system. So if you don't account for that in part as part of your onboarding plan, you need to like have the system more or less finished before you can bring people in to train them how to use it. That will surprise you. I've seen people like timeline training alongside development of the platform, and it just doesn't work because it's all going to change by the time they actually get in to start using it. Cool. We wanted to take a question from the Q&A from Erica. Thank you, Erica. Which is, how are you making a business case for a DAM with the rise of AI integrations and other SaaS content platforms like Box? What will basic DAM functionalities have to offer that AI won't be able to accomplish in the fast approaching future? It's a good question.
It's a good question. Yeah, so the ones that come in live, we don't have time to like think about, so we're just gonna go off the cuff. But I'll start with some initial thoughts. So I think what is often overlooked in sort of executive level thinking around AI, like we just want AI, let's just get it, let's just do it, is the amount of structure that AI needs to be successful. AI it is not able to do much without a lot of direction. And a lot of its direction comes from what you're telling it, you know, via prompts, how you're training it on your data, your taxonomy, you know, your classifications, your use cases, et cetera. And just having assets in a platform like Box, it's going to be hard to build that level of structure and training and, you know, integration of other resources to help the AI make sense out of what it's looking at. It just doesn't know very much, right? You have to tell it, and then it can start pattern matching, but you need to tell it what patterns to look for. So you're going to be limited in a tool like that, where it's going to be able to do some visual identification. Like, there's a green flower in this picture. Like, that's not that useful. It's really not what, you know, AI is going to be, you know, excelling at. So DAMs have a lot of capability to allow you to tell it how to understand the assets through metadata, through taxonomy, et cetera. And so once it starts to use that structure, it can learn, it can be trained, it can start replicating and actually doing a little bit more. But AI, just like, you can't just turn it on and be like, make cool stuff happen with assets. You know, here's 5 million of them in Box. And it'll be like, I don't know, I found a few pictures of the beach. Do you want those? It's just not going to be that helpful. So that's kind of my initial thought on that. What do you think, Jason?
Yeah, I think there's two really big, besides like structure, I think there's two big areas where AI is not going to be successful. And a biggest one is probably permissions management. AI doesn't know who these people are, what they need to be able to do, what they need to be able to see. There's probably like a group of people that need to understand the organization and the context. Like, AI is bad at context typically. Won't understand the organizational context for things. So like if you don't have a DAM manager who knows, okay, this department should see this assets, but only these people in this department should see these assets, like, it's not going to work. And AI won't figure that out on its own. We've seen AI be successful when it comes to automatic metadata generation, like characterizing a thing. but not organizing a thing. It doesn't know organization. So that's the other part where AI is really not going to be successful, is like user experience, like how people need to work with the system. It doesn't understand human context in that way. So if I give you a marketing like a creative designer, they need to make like a marketing campaign, and you have AI is set up the dam for them so that they can get what they need. It doesn't understand that entire use case from end to end, so that there's not going to be like a level of comprehension that supports their work in the way that they need to be supported, as well as like all the other use cases that typically happen in a dam system. So AI is really great for, again, classification, providing additional richness to things. It shouldn't be driving the bus, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think we're at the like you can just give the tool like a bunch of assets and be like, we can now operate, we're not there. And I don't know if we will be there. Honestly, like there's yeah. So at least, yeah, Gen AI, but like, we're getting into agentic AI capabilities within DAM platforms. We're seeing this being deployed by the vendors more and more. So there's some interesting stuff there. But they're very, I think in a smart way, they're very task focused on, they're not going to be the whole user interface. They're going to help orchestrate small tasks on the back end that are very repeatable, that, can be easily trained for a machine to do, because the logic is very consistent, and it's
Right.
highly structured. And whereas, if it's stuff that is, like Jason said, like more user experience stuff, there's just a lot of opportunity for well, there's just
Right.
not a lot there yet.
Right. My litmus test for is AI a good idea or not is like, give it a question like, would you trust AI to go find all the duplicate assets in the system? And I'd be like, yeah, that would be a great thing to have an AI do. Find me all the exact copies. But, and then you follow up with, are you okay with AI deciding which ones to delete? And you immediately go, no, I'm not. I'm not okay with that at all. I would not want to trust the machine to decide which things should not be here anymore. So that's kind of like the boundaries that you can feel out for yourself. Like, what are you comfortable handing off? What kinds of decisions should it be making? And the answer is not many decisions at all. Certainly nothing terminal like deleting stuff. But
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, all right, let's go back to one of our prepared questions. I think we were gonna I want to flip the order here, Jason, and ask you this one. So one of the not prepared, but received ahead of time questions. So we received a question that is, how do you define the hard boundaries between your DAM and other collaboration storage tools like SharePoint, OneDrive, Google Drive, Basecamp, et cetera? Specifically, how do you decide when an asset is considered live in the DAM versus a draft or archived elsewhere? So this is classic work in progress versus final state, which is like an eternal DAM dilemma that has been going on since DAM started. So what are you thinking of on this topic, Jason?
Since the very first dam, which I think I found out was Canto, but like it's basically people were storing photos in dam and they needed to organize their photos in something and decide which ones were going to be like the main ones. So work in progress has always been in dam, like since the very beginning. But I think the challenge with work in progress is it sets up like a two-tiered system for how to think about stuff inside your system. That you have to think about like, is this asset complete when it's the final version of something with all of the metadata? We can deliver it out to people, or is it not complete and only this small group of people should handle it, see it? Because, do we care if it has a full set of metadata? Does it only need like minimally required stuff? And you immediately start running into friction with that. Like, when does it become final? Like, how do we decide if it's final? Like, do we have criteria for that? What happens if we don't actually want anyone to see this? So I think that if there is an institutional desire to get people out of these other tools, SharePoint and OneDrive and Google Drive and et cetera, and get everything into the DAM, then that question is a very easy one to answer. You just say, well, everything belongs in the DAM if it's something that somebody can use. And I think that's a hard one too. So I've seen not everything belongs. like scratch space probably doesn't belong unless you're very concerned about losing it. The main focus, the main purpose of having everything in the same system is so that people can share and reuse content, whether it's final or not final. If you've got private stuff on your desktop that no one else needs access to but you, I would argue it maybe doesn't belong in the DAM system. So, but that's for me, that would be my boundary. But again, it depends. Like if there's a risk to having in progress assets in the DAM system, like you're worried that the wrong people will get access, even with permissions and controls and stuff, then maybe you shouldn't put them there. It really, again, it depends. And of course, someone has to manage all this stuff. So what I've seen with companies is that the DAM managers only are responsible for final assets, and they don't care what you do in your other folders with your other junk as long as it doesn't spill over into other people's work. So that's one way to handle that challenge, because otherwise it's too much for them to manage. So it depends on your appetite for managing assets, managing user expectations, and how much you really need to get stuff off of people's computers or out of SharePoint or Box or whatever. I'll ask you, Kara, the same question.
Yeah, I think you made a really good point that DAM is a collaboration tool. It should be a collaboration tool. But the boundaries of how much you allow the work in progress versus final state assets, it really is kind of it's like a collection policy level decision. So, at some point, somebody needs to decide what's allowed there. And a lot of times this is a conversation with your IT team to talk about the other file sharing systems and what, because a lot of times they're like, we want to get people off of this, or we want to minimize our spend with Dropbox, or, something like that. And they probably have an opinion on this. But, at the same time, to make work in progress work in DAM, it often takes, it takes a lot of work to make it work. You're really asking people to change their creative or production processes. And if it doesn't work without a hitch, they will reject that. They will just not do it. And we've seen that happen over and over, where we've really tried to get the DAM to be the tool for work in progress. And it's just, there are challenges with that for certain kinds of creative or production work, video production, for example. A lot of the DAM, quote unquote, DAM systems versus MAM or production asset management are not really designed for the high volume, large file workflows that people have in video production. And so they end up being too slow, or they don't have certain features that people are interested in using. And so they just end up reverting right back to their SharePoints or whatever, what have you. So if you're trying to change how people behave, you've got to work hard to understand their workflows, figure out how you can not just replicate, but maybe improve on those in the DAM. And then, do a lot of testing with them to make sure that it's really going to meet their needs, and they don't just, reject the whole thing. So I think, to me, that's one of the biggest challenges around this question.
Yeah, you always have to focus on the what's in it for me question. Like you have to make it worth their while to change their whole process if they're used to managing and organizing their own content in their own space. And you're asking them to trust someone else to manage that space for them. That's a big ask. So I think you have to really play on like, what do I get out of this if I do this? What happens as a benefit as a result? That's not always super easy to do right out of the box.
Yeah.
All right, you had said you wanted to answer a question down here.
I did. I saw one that came in on the Q&A that I flagged. This one I would like to answer. So I guess I'll ask it, or do you want to ask it?
I'll ask you.
Okay.
Anonymous attendee says leadership seems to be against a governance board. I understand. How do you convince leadership of this necessary step?
Favorite topic. Okay, so is it necessary? I think you're gonna ask that question. So I have been working on developing a course on governance, which starts in less than a week, a week from yesterday with Henry Stewart Events, and it's a 4-part online course that's going to be throughout the month of September, and it's all on governance. So I just want to quickly plug that and say, if you want to learn more about governance, do come to the course, and we can offer you a 20% discount on that. And we'll be doing some deep stuff on governance for DAM. So let me try to give a very short answer to this complex question. So governance is a bunch of things. So when people say governance, everybody seems to be thinking of something else or not something else, but different people mean different things when they say governance. Some people think roles and responsibilities, a RACI chart. Some people think of standards and policies. Some people think of boring meetings with a whole bunch of important stakeholders not wanting to be there. And so that's kind of the case in this question. And the answer is, it's kind of all that and more, but maybe you don't need the boring meetings. So I think it depends on what you need to accomplish. So governance should allow for the system to add value to the organization, to run efficiently without friction, and not to create bureaucracy, bottlenecks, complexity, et cetera. So I really think that, if done right, it's done in such a way that it actually is an enabler. So how to make that happen? Is it that you need a governance committee? If there's a governance committee, what is their role? So this is where the roles and responsibilities come into play. There's a lot of different kind of layered responsibilities around DAM. There's responsibilities around the platform. There's responsibilities around how it's deployed, how it's managed, et cetera. There's responsibilities around how it's configured. There's responsibilities around data and assets and how the metadata model works, the schema, the taxonomy, the vocabularies, how data integrates with other systems. There's responsibilities around policy, et cetera. If those things, those responsibilities cannot be answered by, or the responsibility cannot be designated to an individual, and it needs to be a group, then who needs to be in that group and why? And it should be very specific. Is the group about the platform? Is the group about the taxonomy? Is the group about, maybe those are different groups. So I think the blanket governance board idea maybe needs to be blown up a little bit and just rethought. What is it that there need to be stakeholder input on specifically? And then how are those stakeholders' inputs going to be translated into standards and policies? And when I say policy, I mean like little p policy, like very simple statements of decisions of how we want this system to work. And then how does that get implemented in the system configuration? And then when things, come up, a change wants to happen, we've got user feedback, we need to do a major initiative, like maybe we need a bigger group of people. Maybe that's a steering committee. It's not a governance board, it's a steering committee, but they're only for strategic decisions. But then maybe there's a taxonomy board composed of data stewards who really have a deep understanding of the data at a very granular level. And they are the ones that answer, should we update the taxonomy to include these new terms that have been proposed? Maybe. And then at what frequency do those people need to meet? So I think that's I think it's more complicated than that. I don't think proposing a governance board out of the gate is necessarily what should happen. I also think there are ways to do this from the ground up more than top down. I think leadership support is important for ultimate, for the highest level of maturity of governance, you will need leadership support. But how much can you do bottom up with a few collaborators to solve very specific problems you have today through governance? So yeah, that's my little bit spiel on that question. Jason, anything to add?
That was pretty thorough. I had like a one really simple thing you could use as like a elevator pitch version of governance is like, if you don't have governance, people working together to establish terms, and you want to integrate any other platform with your DAM, it's not going to work. It's going to break. You're going to spend a lot of money and time fixing integrations because people change terms, change taxonomies, change field names, attributes. You have to have at least something in place that is looking at who's being affected when you make changes. And is it positive or negative? And should they be, alerted or involved in those decisions? And that's just like the roots of base governance, down at that real simple level. And sometimes that will grow into something more organized and like permanent. But you at the very least need to consider, like, if we make a change in the dam, who does it affect? How does it impact them? And are we going to break expensive stuff? So there's that, because you don't know the needs of technology often if you're managing the dam system, unless you're on the same team as them. So you do have to keep that communication open. That was all I had to add.
Thank you. I'm starting to kind of like flag a few more in the Q&A that
I've been
maybe
voting them up too.
You're voting them up? Wow.
I'm voting them up.
I didn't know we could vote them up.
You can vote.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right, let's go to a few of these. So let me ask you one, Jason. You do a lot of implementations and you see integration work happening. So we have a question from an anonymous attendee. I know it might depend, but how long can an integration take, specifically when companies are hiring contract workers for a limited amount of time?
Ooh.
I think this gets into our MVP discussion we were having on our
yeah. Yeah.
a little bit.
So if you're launching a new system and an integration is part of that new system launch, it's part of what you need in order for the new system to be considered available, then the integration has to be part of the implementation process. So it can take, it depends on what the integration needs to accomplish. If you are simply sending data from the dam to something else that is picking it up, and all of the work is happening on the other end with the other platform, that is very different than having to like build stuff in multiple places that need to talk to each other in different ways. Bidirectional is massively more complicated than unidirectional communication. If stuff is just sending things into the dams, that is very simple and very straightforward because most dams have very clear APIs that are well documented to accept data or send metadata out. It depends on, depends. We're going to go through the transcript and search for depends and see just how many times it gets mentioned. It's going to be a lot. But yeah, it's hard to say. I've seen integrations take multiple years. I've seen them take 6 months. If you don't have a clearly defined use case for integration, it will explode on you and you'll be in a lot of trouble. You have to know ahead of time what it needs to do, what format the data needs to be accepted in, basically exactly which behavior you're trying to get out of it. Because if you don't, the scope will just creep unbelievably fast. I've seen that on more than a few projects. I hope that's a good answer for that question.
Yeah,
I know it depends again, but
well, having really, really clear requirements on the integration is critical. And I agree, like bidirectional, when you're having like metadata that's coming in from a source of record into the dam and other data that lives in the dam going out to another system, and not just, drop the assets here or pick up the assets from here, because those are a lot simpler. Sometimes there's out of the box integrations that will do that on day one. So there's really nothing you have to build, which is awesome. So, but when it's a custom integration, what are the trigger events that should have a piece of data or an asset move from one place to another? What are the behaviors expected when that happens? Is there a human intervention at any of those at any point, or is it just all automated? What's the logic for how the data moves to the other place? What is the data mapping? How does the data get translated between one system and another? Does anything need to be transformed, or does it just kind of go in exactly how it is today? And here we get back to governance. What are the standards that you're using, and how do those apply across systems? So governance board may be needed when you have system integrations where these things are talking to each other. Yes. So once you map all that out, then you can kind of figure out, well, how complex of an integration are we talking about? And you talk to some developers about how long it might take, right? They're going to be able to give you a better answer once they know what you're
Right.
trying to do. And so, but yeah, talk to your dam vendor first about what do they have out of the box? Do
Right.
they have any pre-built connectors for the target system? Do they have, and there's some third parties that have built connector platforms, middleware that kind of can link them up, and then through GUI interfaces allow you to connect the systems together. So like minimal or low code solutions. So there's a lot of approaches you can take there.
It's more and more of those all the time too. Zapier, notably, has been doing this forever. I would say that if you are interested in, if you're in getting to the dam selection process, even though that's another topic, and you're considering a vendor based on the strength of their integrations, you want to see those. You want to see exactly what they do before you hang your hat on that as a reason to pick one vendor over another, because you can say you have an Adobe integration, but what does it actually do? And does it do what you need it to do? So just another part of the discovery process for yourselves is establishing exactly what you need at the end of all of this. I think that's the most important. For any integration, what is the expected end result? Where do we need to be at the end?
Yeah, I think that's really important, because a lot of times when you're shopping for them, you're like, I know we need Monday.com, but show us what you got. And then you see what they have, and then you go into the implementation phase, and then you're like, well, we needed to do X, Y, and Z. And the vendor's like, we never said it could do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you just don't know what you
Yeah.
need ahead of time. As much as you can get ahead of that to be prepared for, like Jason said, what is the expected behavior and how should it work? If you can do that during your discovery and selection process, all the better, because it will help manage expectations on both sides. And so it gets kind of ugly when those expectations are out of alignment and you discovered it too late. But it was really an oversight on everyone's part. Like nobody's to blame. It's just
right.
We didn't ask it the right way, or they didn't demo,
Yep.
they didn't understand our use case well enough to demo what we needed. So yeah.
That's a big one too. They don't work where you work. They only know what they know, and their experience with other companies maybe like you or other institutions like you. Only you know what you know and what you need. So being able to spell that out and define those use cases is one of the most important pieces of all of this. Let's see.
All right. We may have time for like two more. And I think we got
a bunch.
I flagged some on the Q&A that came in, but I don't know. Jason, do you want to pick one?
I'll pick one. I'm gonna do this one from Erica asked another question. Erica, you're asking a lot of questions. These are good. But this one's good because how would you define what a dam is and what it's for to broader teams that would potentially have dam users within them? How do you explain the dam will fix everything, but it will do X? So the easiest way is there is actually, I think we might have one, but there are ROI calculators. Basically, dams are about fostering communication and saving money. That is like, it is meant to be a place for people to be collaborative and to store stuff securely and to have the ability to find things that took money to make. So it's very much a financial thing, easy sell to a leadership. For the creative teams, it's a chance to say like, okay, how do you know if you have the right version of a thing? Something dams are very good at is managing like version control. How do you know you have the most recent one? How do you know that it is the approved version? So there's rights and metadata that you don't get from like SharePoint, then platforms like that, things that you couldn't know without more structured information. People who might want to use DAM are people who are tired of asking other people for files, or tired of taking hard drives home because they need to be able to work somewhere else. If you have a SaaS system, it's there where you need it and you can find stuff and you can work on things. And again, DAM doesn't really solve a whole lot. DAM is just another place to put stuff, but it makes a lot of things much, much faster and easier. Finding things, sharing things, controlling access to things, delivering things to different endpoints, seeing things visually. So one of the other defects with things like Box and Dropbox and Airtable is rich assets, things that maybe are being presented like in 3D, for example. A lot of dams can do that. You can rotate things in space. You can annotate things and make comments and do approval processes. There are workflows in dams that maybe exist in Asana now that maybe you don't need Asana anymore. So again, financial savings, time savings, resource reuse. There are so many good reasons to use a dam instead of some of the other things that people are typically doing. I hope that's helpful. I stayed away from like the actual definition of dam. I didn't want to define it in the normal way. I wanted to say like, what's in it for you, which again is like the way to go with a lot of these conversations.
Yeah, I think for those audiences or stakeholders, that's really where you got to start, is what's in it for you, as in what's in it for them. And if you know them and what their needs are and what their challenges are today, all the better. And hopefully you can get to know that, because if you're getting a dam or interested in getting a dam or thinking about getting a dam, there's a reason. There's some problem you need to solve. So what is it? And how can you bring that problem to these people who are critical stakeholders, to understand that, hey, if you know X problem that we have, and like that's a big issue that we have been hearing about for a long time, and everybody's got that problem. Well, we think we found a solution, and it's this, something like that, that just captures it in, in their concerns, and like, and as Jason said, like in the what's in it for them. So yeah, it's not going to be magic, like out of the box, like we've solved it, we got a dam, turn it on and it all works. Like there's work that goes into making it work to solve that problem. Some of those things are governance, some of those things are workflows, some of those things are system configuration, but the opportunity is there that's not there for maybe how they're working today. So you need their support to make it. And if you can show them what a dam looks like and does, that really helps. People like, they get the aha when they're like, oh, that's what it is.
Yeah.
If you can kind of get them a demo of something that you're interested in, that really does help with the business case.
Absolutely. You give people some wow moments and they'll be excited. I mean, you could also argue that buying a dam just breaks a big problem up into a bunch of smaller problems that you now have to deal with. But that's maybe like a topic, like a different question. They're easier challenges to surmount though. And it lets you, instead of having one big rock that, frustrates you and everybody else, maybe you've got smaller things that now you have to attend to that are manageable. And that's still an improvement over current process, we have time for one more question. I'm going to ask it of you, Kara, because you voted it and you said you were going to answer it. From Katie, any resources you can recommend to help develop a case for leadership to put more resources toward dams, specifically in cultural heritage?
Yes, I voted that because we have a resource and I wanted to point you to it. So Brittany, if I don't know how fast you can do this, is find the business case article that we have on our website and drop that in the chat. If not, we'll follow up with it afterward. So we have an article on building a business case. It's not specific to cultural heritage, it's general. But I think the key points there are aligning with the needs and the goals and the priorities of your leadership. So if you want to ask them for more money, more resources for this initiative, they need to understand how it advances their initiative. So what is it that they're really caring about right now? What are they trying to advance or achieve within the organization? And how does DAM support that? So try to get into their mindset a little bit, like talk to some people, look at some communications, strategic plans, annual priorities, et cetera, and try to get into that mindset. It's really, I've been thinking about this a lot lately because we have an internal thing where there's an ask from some of our team members. They want to make a change and so I'm actually in this position where I'm the leadership person. And I'm like, you haven't thought through all of my priorities, and I'm not going to be able to like say yes to this until I can see how it'll help what I'm trying to achieve. So yeah, it's another what's in it for me thing, but what's in it for your leadership. And that's kind of how I'd recommend starting. And then those ROI calculator things, doing like numbers are great. Like show some numbers. What is the current cost? What's the cost of inaction? What's the cost of the investment? What's the expected return on the investment? And that guide that we have shows you how to make some of those calculations so you can get some real dollars in front of people, because that always goes a long way.
Yep. Yeah, I think we should maybe rename this this webinar to "It Depends," subtitled "What's in it for me." I think that's the theme of today. With him, as we sometimes say. Yeah, I definitely, if you're dealing with cultural heritage institutions, there's also the potential cost of loss of information, which a dam system could maybe help mitigate if you're not currently in a digital preservation system. A lot of them have hashing or other ways to prevent or mitigate loss of digital files. So that one could be also a point to play on, is you are keeping things from disappearing, which sometimes has a lot of impact on senior stakeholders. So just want to throw that in there too.
Yeah, and a lot of times cultural heritage organizations have far, far too many platforms, like relative to their budget and size of their organization. And a lot of those can be consolidated into a dam. So that's another thing that you have to think about. I think we are out of time. Yes.
Out of time.
I apologize to those of you whose question we didn't get to. We are gonna, see if we can follow up on some of them. And we will be sending some information via email afterward, Brittany, and hopefully you got a bunch of links in the chat. So hopefully that was helpful. Yeah, we appreciate you coming for all the questions. We hope this was helpful, and we'll be doing more like this. So let us know what you want us to talk about in future AMAs. We'll look forward to seeing you there.